Hello, everyone, and welcome to MSUFCU's Financial Education Seminar Series. We appreciate you all joining us and are excited to be here with you virtually this evening. These presentations were created with you in mind, with the intention to give financial education on a number of relatable topics to help expand your knowledge of finances. Each event will be hosted by a member of our financial education department or by one of our partners, or like tonight, by one of our own VPs of a division here at MSUFCU, hoping to connect you with resources in our community. We have a number of diverse presentations planned for you this year, and you can explore and register for them by visiting us at msufcu.org/events. Tonight's event is being recorded. You can rewatch or share the event by going to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/MSUFCU and then selecting the seminar series option from the playlist. We will be taking questions tonight, so you can use that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit any questions you have for our presenter. And we'll try to get to those as they come in. If we're on a slide that's maybe pertinent to the question that you did ask, then we can address it then, but we will definitely get to those. So once again, use that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit any questions. I'm Therese Bacon, and I'll be your facilitator this evening. If you have any technology issues, you can definitely chat me directly, and I can try to assist you that way. So tonight, I want to introduce our awesome guest, who is Jamie Smathers. She is the VP of MSUFCU's Fraud Prevention and BSA division. So Jamie, I'll pass it over to you so you can introduce yourself to our audience, tell us a little bit about your work with MSUFCU over the years, and then we can lead right into your presentation this evening.
Sounds great. Thanks, Therese. Hi, everyone, and good evening. I'm Jamie Smathers, the VP of Fraud Prevention and BSA here at Michigan State University Federal Credit Union. Very happy to be with you to talk about fraud, scams, and identity. I've been in the fraud space since 2017 with a focus on helping our members, helping our organization and the communities that we serve to protect finances, assist members through these challenging times when they do face fraud or scams, and just continue to build out our communities with awareness and education. So very happy to be with you all and to share this information. We'll go ahead and jump right in and get started. As you can see, our topic is fraud, scams, and identity. Specifically, our agenda for tonight is to level set on some terms and definitions. There are many terms and words I will be using throughout this session, and I want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of what I'm referring to and just to give some broader awareness to the fraud space. We're also going to just talk about why. Why are you here today? Why are we talking about this? Why is it so important? We also want to address what's going on currently in our environment. What are some fraud and scam trends that we're seeing that are impacting not just our members here at MSUFCU, but throughout the state and potentially the country. And then again, we'll talk about the impact of those fraud and scams, and more importantly, what we can do about them, how we can keep our finances safe, how we can keep our identities safe and secure, and other measures we can take. And as Therese said, we'll open it up to questions throughout. Feel free to put them in the chat, but we'll certainly have time at the end as well. So I have a good list here for us to kind of set the framework for talking about fraud, scams, and identity. Fraud, we use the term, which to us means a wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. We do define fraud and scams separately. They are somewhat interchangeable at times. Fraud is perpetuated by scams. There's a lot of overlap and correlation. Scams are the use of deception or manipulation intended to achieve financial gain. A lot of scams are perpetrated through social engineering, which is the manipulation of people, humans, into performing acts or divulging sensitive information. A key way people use social engineering to get information, to get humans and people to give out money, their personal identity or information, is through phishing, which is purporting to be a legitimate person or entity to get people to act. This often can come through various channels, emails, phone calls, text messages, QR codes, even letters in the mail. We're also going to talk a little bit and use the term spoofing. So spoofing is the ability to disguise the true sender of an email, a phone call, a website that makes it look like it's coming from a known or legitimate entity or company. And then last, we'll talk about identity theft, which is the use of personal or financial information without permission. PII is a term I might use, and that just stands for personally identifiable information. It's those key elements that make up who you are, that make up your identity, such as your name, your address, your social security number, and so on. So now that we have some of those basic fraud terms, I want to jump into why this is so important. Why are we here? Why are we talking about this? Unfortunately, fraud and scams are prevalent. They are happening at a very rapid pace, often, frequently, and coming at us from all angles. They're very often tied to everyday behaviors. That's why we see a lot of fraud and scams tied to social engineering, tied to the things that we do on a regular basis that often makes it hard to discern whether what we're doing is legitimate or not, whether we're interacting with who we really think we are or not, and so on. So it's things like checking your email on your phone or scrolling through social media or answering a phone call. As I mentioned, it's really challenging sometimes to discern if what you're hearing, seeing, doing is legitimate or not. That's where the spoofing, the social engineering, and the phishing tactics come in. Fraud and scams impact so many people. It's no longer the case that we can say this segment of our population is most vulnerable. Everyone and anyone is susceptible to falling for fraud or scams. As we experience fraud and scams, it often creates uncertainty for what we're doing, who we can trust, who we can talk to, what we can do to rectify maybe the situation that we find ourselves in. Experiencing fraud can also lead to further complications with your identity and its security. If your identity is compromised and steps aren't taken, perpetuating that fraud and having more things happen against that identity become possible. And for us in the financial industry, we know that fraud, scams, identity theft often impact our finances. We could experience losing money. We could experience giving or sending money to someone or something that we didn't fully know or thought it was legitimate and it was not. And then another reason why this is so important is that, and it's really important that we're talking about this, is that very often people who do experience fraud and scams do not share it. There's often, negative feelings, sentiment tied with going through something like that. Can create embarrassment, again, uncertainty, and cause a lot of harm, for the people that go through it, and often just don't feel comfortable sharing. And so we want to bring this to the forefront. We want to talk about it. As I mentioned, anyone is susceptible to falling for fraud or scams. And so it is okay to talk about and to bring awareness and share these instances with others. So what are some of the fraud trends that we're seeing, not just here at our institution, but across the financial industry? Phishing, as I gave that definition earlier, phishing is extremely prevalent. It's happening all the time. We on our end hear about investigations or instances where people are reporting that they got a phone call. They're checking with us to see if it was us that was calling them, because sometimes fraudsters will spoof your financial institution. You could get a phone call or a text message that appears to be trying to legitimize a card transaction or tell you that your account is locked and you have to take steps to get it unlocked. So very often phishing is being reported to us. Very often it's through phone numbers and emails. So calls, text messages, and emails are most prevalent. And very often in those phishing instances, the fraudster knows some of the information already. They might know your name, they might know part of your card information or other information already, and they're looking to just piece together more information to then perpetrate the fraud. We see a lot of other social engineering happening outside of phishing. Internet and mobile application searches can lead to fake sites. So even trusting, recognized app platforms, sometimes there are bad apps on there. Sometimes you can go to a website that appears to be from a legitimate organization or company, and it's really not. So it's really important to check that URL. Often clicking on links or participating in online activities can cause compromise. So think about social media, think about what is being posted, what you're participating in. Sometimes even there can be bad games or surveys on social media platforms that could lead to either loss of your information or you compromise access and potentially download malware to your device. Another way that devices come into play is through SIM swapping. So your SIM, whether that's a physical SIM or a digital SIM, could be swapped to another phone, which would then compromise the data and the information that you have saved on your phone. We also continue to see a lot of mail theft. So the United States Postal Service, there's a lot of people who still leverage that, send a lot of communication, a lot of funds via checks or other ways through the mail. And we see a lot of mail compromised and used to perpetuate fraud. There's also concern around things such as burglaries, robberies, muggings, vandalism of cars and vehicles, stealing others' purses, wallets, things like that. Continues to be a concern, continue to hear reports of that. And then often we see, unauthorized transactions happening from the information that was gathered, whether it's a card or checks or just an ID, and then that could lead to identity theft. And then extortion, right? Being online and interacting with others. Sometimes we might get contact from someone that we don't know and maybe a notice or something that says, I have information on you, or I have something that if I were to share this out, you wouldn't want it to be shared. And so there's a lot of extortion happening where individuals end up paying the fraudster to not share what they believe they might have. So those are some of the top fraud trends. I also want to touch on scams because scams are super prevalent, happening all the time. As I mentioned earlier, it could be through a phone call interaction. It could be through meeting someone in person. It could be through social media. It could be through, a mailing to your home. So there's many ways that scams can be carried out. So it's really important to be aware. The ones I have listed here that you can see are ones that really have withstood the test of time. And what I mean by that is these are scams that have been happening for decades and they continue to happen. And the reason they continue to happen is because there's so much success behind it. Fraudsters, this is their main job most often, right? They're committing fraud 24/7. And even if they're going after many people, it doesn't take many to make it lucrative. So some of these scams, such as investments, over time have taken on different nuances or been perpetrated in slightly new or different ways. A lot of that has to do with advances in technology. For example, current investment scams sometimes involve Bitcoin. And right, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have Bitcoin, but we did have investment scams. And so these things continue to happen, just evolve. And that's why it sometimes makes it really challenging to prevent it from ever happening. And we have to work to identify it, detect it, mitigate it, and then try to put controls in place to prevent it from happening again. Relational scams, I mean, in terms of interacting with others. So very often through our digital world, we're meeting people all the time. We're interacting with others all the time, whether that's just through posts or chats or liking things or looking at things. We're interacting with others. And that makes it easier for people to make connections. And over time, as you establish connections, that's where those who have bad intentions, our fraudsters, will gain a connection, make a form a relationship, and then over time kind of exploit that relationship, start asking for money or start asking for help in some way, whether that's, can I use your account to cash a check, or can I have my friend send you money to give to me? Or I don't have an account right now. Can I use your account? To other situations where we hear stories of, you meet someone and they're located in, maybe another country or even another continent, and they need money, right? For some reason, their bank account is frozen or not accessible, or they just run out of money and they're stranded to a certain degree. The variations, there's many. So I don't want to describe all of them. I won't have time, but I also don't want to give a sense that there's just very specific ways that these are being carried out. There's many variations, but we have to be really, I think, conscientious of like who we're engaging with, and maybe somewhat to a certain level doing our due diligence to know who it is that we're interacting with. Another common scam is what we just kind of in quotation marks there have as a government scam. So you could potentially get a phone call or a text message that appears to be coming from a government agency, such as you missed jury duty, or you have an outstanding ticket that you haven't paid, or back taxes, and they're demanding money right now. You have to pay it now, or we will arrest you, or we will take some other very scary action. And very often, and I'll talk a little bit about this, what type of payments are most popular for fraudsters, but very often they're looking for you to have just that heightened sense of urgency to act, and do it quickly. The grandparent scam, so this isn't targeted to just grandparents anymore, but very often fraudsters will contact an adult and they will use technology again to appear to be a grandchild or a younger relative, saying, I'm arrested, I need your help, or I'm in some other dire situation and I need you to bail me out, to send me money or take some other action. Charity scams, we see this all the time as different things happen throughout the world, where fraudsters will take advantage of vulnerable moments and people who have big hearts and want to help others. And so very often we see fake charity sites, contacts again to individuals claiming to be from a charity and maybe really not. We also see scams tied to sweepstakes, contests, lotteries. We still see Publishers Clearinghouse scams where you get a lovely packet in the mail and it says you won a lot of money, yet you never entered a contest. So things to just keep aware of, and these are continuing to happen and evolve. We also see employment scams where you might apply for jobs on phony websites, even get an interview, maybe even meet with someone either virtually or in person, think you have a job, and then you're asked to use your own bank account to perform the business related activity. And that's where then the fraud is perpetrated, and very often the fraudster gets some of your good money. Then we also have loan scams. There's a lot of ways for people to get loans online through different financial institutions and other providers. Sometimes we have to pay a little bit closer attention to where it is that we're applying for a loan, making sure it's a legitimate website and a legitimate company. All of that being said, I've alluded to a lot of this, but I want to talk through the impact. Maybe some of these are a little bit more obvious, but there's a lot of impact to those that are victims of fraud and scams. One of the most common is I have an unauthorized transaction on my debit or credit card. Your card is compromised, right? You need to contact your financial institution, get that card blocked, start the process for your claim, and get a new card issued so that you can begin using either your checking account or your line of credit again. It also has an impact on accounts. Sometimes our login credentials to our online banking have been compromised, whether we know it or not. Maybe we gave out some of those credentials, or maybe we got a phone call and we gave out our step-up authentication code that we got texted to our phones to the fraudster on the phone, and then they're able to log in. When accounts are compromised, you'll need to work with your financial institution to get that rectified, to get that account number changed, to make sure there's no further vulnerability for someone else to have access to it. We also have the impact related to devices. So as we're checking our email, responding to text messages, on the internet, on social media, we have to be cognizant of what we're clicking on, because sometimes it might seem harmless what you clicked on, but it could download malware to your phone if it's a bad site or a bad link. And from there, the device is compromised, meaning all the data and the access to that device is compromised. So you have to go to your phone carrier, your cell phone provider to get that straightened out. We also see personally identifiable information being compromised. When this happens and you're a victim of identity theft, you have to file a police report. Filing a police report protects you. Not only helps with the instance that you experienced, but helps prevent any future complications if your identity continues to be used unauthorized or fraudulently, and others take out loans or do other actions in your name. It's also important to contact all of the places where you hold accounts, whether that's financial institutions or other places that have your personally identifiable information. Maybe more obvious impact is the loss of funds, right? You have to work to regain maybe funds that you've authorized to go out because you were susceptible to a scam, or you've lost funds through fraud that you have to work to recover. There's also just the emotional, mental, social, and even physical impact that fraud and scams have on people. It creates a lot of uncertainty. It creates a lot of doubt, panic, sadness, and sometimes it's challenging to know where to turn or who to rely on or what to do next. There can be a lot. It can be very overwhelming. And it also takes a lot of time to recover. It takes a lot of time to work through and contact all of those places where you hold accounts. It takes time to file a police report. It takes time to contact the credit bureaus to put a freeze on your credit. So what are some safeguarding measures? One of the safeguarding measures we want to talk about is being aware of what information is being asked. Protect your personal information. It's okay to be a little leery of why somebody might want your social security number, or why somebody might want the expiration date and the CVV number on the back of your card. Personal information includes anything that identifies you, including your card information and your account login credentials. Those are things that should be kept secure, not shared. Another safeguarding measure is to do independent searches to verify the validity of a merchant, site, app, or unsolicited contact. If it appears that you're getting a phone call from your financial institution, or if it appears that you're getting an email notification from another entity where you recently made a purchase, it's okay to pause and do some separate research or due diligence to ensure that that contact to you was legitimate. It's okay to do a separate search. It really should be a separate search and not rely on the information that you're questioning, but double check it. Be wary of links and other contacts and of what is shared and with whom through social media. Again, social media is great. It's a great way to connect with others. It's a great way to learn and see about new things. But fraudsters know that, and fraudsters know that we're humans and we like to interact and we're social, and they're going to take advantage of that. So it's really important that we, again, can just kind of pace ourselves to a certain degree, pay attention to who we're having a conversation with or what we're posting in terms of information about ourselves. Examine emails and other notices for signs of phishing. Again, are they asking you to act with a sense of urgency? Are there typos or other information in the email that just doesn't read like it would be coming from that organization or that person? Sometimes there might not be spelling or grammar errors, but it just doesn't seem like it's either formal or business appropriate for the type of company, or if it's personal, it's like it doesn't really read how that person has communicated via written communication before. So just things to pay attention to. Keep in mind the types of transactions that fraudsters prefer. This is what I was alluding to earlier. They love fast, anonymous, and unrecoverable means to move money. And that can come through asking for gift cards, cash. We still have victims sending cash through the mail or meeting with the fraudster in person and handing over an envelope of cash. We also have seen an increase in crypto transactions related to fraud. Wires are guaranteed funds. If you request a wire from your financial institution, you are signing off saying, I'm good with where this is going. And so again, if you think you know where it's going, what due diligence, what research have you done to confirm where that money is landing? Whose account is it really going to? Payment apps, so Cash App and some of the other ones where you can do the instant payments back and forth to others that only require a phone number or an email address to send. That's a good way to, unfortunately, have a hard time knowing where and whom is receiving your money. And then, as I've kind of talked through some of these, I think this next safeguarding measure is really critical. Just being mindful, maybe slowing down a little bit. We're in an age where we just go, right? We're on our phones all the time. We're flipping through all the different things. We're responding to many people. We have a lot going on. So sometimes it's hard to slow down and really pay attention to what's in front of us. And that often is what leads to compromise. We didn't realize we clicked on something, or we didn't realize who we were talking to really didn't make sense, or really didn't sound like who they were purporting to be. So being mindful of the task at hand, regardless of what it is really important. We also recommend consulting with a trusted person. This could be a family member, a close friend, a partner, someone that you really trust to be more proactive, take some preparation measures to put in place so that if something unusual happens, if you get a suspicious contact, you have someone you can rely on to talk it through with, right? It's really critical that we have resources, that we have a support network to help us through these moments. Because when we're in them, we might not think of it, but if we continue to talk about it and we continue to share with others, we're just building a stronger network to prepare us for when those heightened moments happen and we experience them. As I mentioned, it's really important to share reminders, share these best practices with others. We encourage people to talk about this, to spread the word. That's what the fraudsters are doing. They have their own communication, they're collaborating, they're using technology. We need to continue to do those things as well. Talk with our friends, our peers, reach out to your financial institution, reach out to others that you interact with. It's really important to spread the word. Some resources here that are external to the credit union that I think are a good few to name, but these are not all encompassing. There are many other resources available that I haven't listed here, but some of the ones that have some good information, good things to think about, and good resources to help us navigate and as I mentioned, be proactive, but also help us through times when maybe we have been exposed to identity theft or experienced fraud or a scam. And that's the Federal Trade Commission. So the ftc.gov has a really good site to learn about common scams. They keep it updated. The same with the Internet Crimes Complaint Center. So if you experience fraud or a scam that happens over the internet, you would want to report it to ic3.gov. This does not substitute filing a formal complaint with your local agency, but it's a good way for the IC3 group to track trends, to help inform changes, and again, communicate and educate individuals. And then we have local law enforcement. It's really important to know your jurisdiction, report local to where you live or where the fraud occurred. That could be your local city or township police department. It could be a sheriff's office, a county-related office or agency, your state office or agency, and then also the FBI. You want to start local though, but depending on the circumstances of what you're reporting, it could get escalated to a larger agency. And then it's really important to know that you have the ability to do a few things with your credit profile. So through the 3 credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, you have the opportunity to check your credit on a regular basis for free. And so I encourage you to do that. Check your credit, make sure there's not anything on there that you don't know about. The other thing that you can do is you can actually freeze your credit. You can put a freeze on it so that as long as you know you're not going to be applying or need someone to be pulling your credit anytime soon, no one else will also be able to pull your credit. And so if someone else were to use your identity and attempt to apply in your name for something, that would be, your credit would be frozen and there wouldn't be an impact to your credit profile. So it's really important to leverage the credit bureaus to be aware of not just your credit score, but the trade lines that you have on your credit profile. At MSUFCU, we have many resources. Our public-facing website, there's a security center that you can go that we provide updates on current trends and best practices. We also support our membership when we're experiencing a spike in a fraud trend by communicating and providing notices through online banking. We also provide alert options. So our members can elect to get notifications for transactions and other things that are happening on their accounts that keep them informed, help them monitor what's going on with their accounts to make sure there isn't anything unauthorized. We have many exclusive member offers that support from a fraud perspective. We offer a CVV key, which is a tool related to card security while shopping online. We also have a card lock feature. So if you lose your physical card, you can actually lock your card on the mobile app. That way you can then report it if it's after hours or just not a convenient time for you. You can then later report it to your institution and feel comfortable knowing that nothing's going to be able to transpire when that card is out of your possession. We also have multi-factor authentication options for online banking and other transactions. We also have fraud prevention services where you can contact the credit union and we can support if there's any questions or concerns. I sped through, I have some time. And so what I would like to do is if there's any questions, I'd like to talk about those, but I'd also maybe like to talk a little bit more about some current trends that maybe I didn't go into as much detail about if we have that time.
Yeah, we yeah, we definitely do. We did have a question come through, which from what I, knew of, this wasn't happening as much anymore, but clearly it still is. So we did have somebody that said that they were paying a bill by mail with a paper check, and that check got intercepted and was like whitewashed, and the fraudster was able to write the check to themselves and cash it that way. So, is that still prevalent? And what would be your advice on, should people still be writing checks? Should they, deliver them differently? Should they switch to electronic? So what's the best practice there, Jamie?
Yeah, so checks are still in circulation. Checks are still being used. It's funny, we have this conversation on somewhat of a regular basis about the prevalence of checks, and people use them, and they're certainly okay to use. I don't want to deter people from using checks. There are other options, though, as you alluded to, Therese, of different ways that you could maybe consider paying bills or doing other transactions. But I do want to address that question specifically. So I'm actually back on the slide here where I have just a brief mail theft, right? And that's really what we are experiencing with mail theft is that mail does get intercepted, right? Whether you're putting maybe an envelope in your own mailbox and putting your flag up for your postal carrier to come pick it up the next day, or you're dropping off an envelope to a blue box. Those are located all over the place, right? Sometimes just down our street, or sometimes, closer to public areas. And so this has been happening actually quite a bit over the last few years. It's ebbed and flowed, but we continue to see checks being intercepted. And as we know, checks have all of your information on them, right? They very often we put in that top left corner the maker's information, at least a name, sometimes often an address, and even a phone number. And then on that check as well is the routing and account number. And so a lot of information, a lot of sensitive information is on those checks. And so, yes, we see that happening. And sometimes that actual physical check is taken, and the term, washing it actually means like using like bleach and some other chemicals to essentially lift off the ink that was originally written on there and then be able to write over it, changing the payee name, changing the dollar amount sometimes, and then that fraudster would take it and cash it. And then unfortunately, most of the time, it's on the person who initially wrote that check to discover that when it cleared their account, it didn't clear for the right amount, it didn't clear to the right person, and they would have to report it to their financial institution. And so it is happening. So there's that scenario, but sometimes also checks are intercepted and then more checks are made from using that image. And so they're making new fake checks, essentially. Those are really hard to detect as well. And so that's super prevalent. And then as I mentioned, with all of the information that's on there, that information could be used to perform other transactions, like attempting ACH transactions or other types with that account information that's been given.
Wow. I know I use I use electronic payments mostly for my own accounts, but there is a couple of bills that I have to pay by check still.
Yeah.
Like HOA dues is one of them that I have to pay. I do use like the MSUFCU bill pay system for that. So that's worked really good. My account number isn't listed like on those checks that get sent through bill pay, right? That my account number isn't on those, right? So that would be a more secure option maybe for the customer that's asking.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know
yeah.
sometimes we still use checks because some some places where we're paying bills, they'll accept a card, but for a fee, right? And so
Yeah.
checks are a good way to avoid some of those extra costs that,
Mhm.
you know, quite honestly, none of us want to pay, and
Yeah.
you know, we could use our money for other things. So I agree. There are some other like electronic transfer options that are
Mhm.
probably a little bit more secure. But I think if we're going to use checks and put them through the mail, dropping them off directly at the post office is the best option. Not saying it wouldn't still be vulnerable to
Mhm.
compromise or interception through that, but it is just a little bit, has been shown to be a little bit more secure than maybe dropping it off at a blue box that's
Mhm.
unsupervised, or you know, the night before in your mailbox. Very often people will drive around just looking for that red flag popped up and then take whatever's in there out. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
something you
happened a
don't
lot
even
throughout.
think would be happening as much in this
Yeah,
day and age. But yeah, I guess that's a old
yeah,
tried and true one. Like you said, the scams that, have always worked.
yeah,
People, the fraudsters will still try those. So
yeah,
yeah. For that member that did ask that question, if you do have, if you're, you have a checking account with MSUFC, you do have option to that bill pay. So if you have any questions about that, just contact us and we can help you navigate the bill pay system. But it's very easy to use. And once you have a payee set up in there, all the information's saved in just a couple of clicks and you can send that check. So that might be a good answer for that specific person situation. So
yeah.
all right.
I
Yeah,
did
if you
want to
want to,
touch on,
yeah, go ahead. Yep.
yeah, sorry. I was going to go back to the phishing fraud trend. And so this is actually something that is really prevalent in my mind right now, just because here at MSUFCU and some other institutions throughout the state have been reporting an increase in this, where our members and even others who aren't our members are getting phone calls from fraudsters that, first of all, the phone number comes through appearing like it's coming from the credit union. And then the person on the line presents themselves as a credit union or the financial institution in questions, a representative from that financial institution. And from there, they very often, as I talked about earlier, have some of your information already. They sometimes know the person by name and will say, well, hello, so-and-so. And then they'll say, you know, we have concerns that your account is compromised or your card is compromised, or we're looking to see if you authorized this transaction. And very often they name, you know, a very higher dollar transaction that right away, right, puts up everyone's alerts or alarms and says, no, I didn't do that. And then they say, well, I just need you to answer a few questions and provide me some additional information and we'll help you through this. And unfortunately, through that conversation and the information they're asking for is some of that more sensitive information, like the rest of your card information, the last 4, 6, 8 digits of your card number, the expiration date, the CVV, that 3-digit code on the back of your card. Sometimes they also, you'll get like an authentication code via text message, and they'll tell you that it's for
Um,
security reasons and to share it. And so very often you're sharing a code that allows them to then create a mobile wallet with your card information. And from there, they're able to do transactions very quickly on your card information. And so that's been happening quite a bit lately. And again, it's another one that kind of ebbs and flows, and we certainly
mhm.
have spikes, but that's been a very recent trend that we, as I talked about, we put out communication on our social
Yeah.
media channels directly to our members to just create awareness around it, that it's happening, and giving them some of those safeguarding measures of what they
Yeah.
can do.
So generally with those, like when you do get those two-factor authentication codes, that'd be something you would have to enter in an app or on a website, right? But like
Yeah,
there's no reason why anyone would be calling and asking for those, right? So that can definitely be trigger, in our minds, like, hey, this is wrong. This is a red flag. Let's not, we shouldn't be giving this out. So yeah,
absolutely.
for sure, man. yeah, it's scary all the ways that the fraudsters can come at you these days. But
It can
yeah,
happen
you can keep
fast and
going. Yep. Yeah.
yeah, no, it can happen fast. And sometimes we don't know, like we might have kind of that inclination that just doesn't sit right with me, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't feel right, but we don't know what to do in the moment, right? We don't know how
Mhm.
to question it or divert it or kind of
Mhm.
do our own research on the side when they're talking fast to us or they're telling us do this now, right? Like we kind of are in that mode where we're go go go, and so we're like okay, you know,
Mhm.
and we're doing those things. It's not until we have a minute that we're like, what did I do?
Yeah. You're like, yes.
You
Yeah.
know, that might not have been the right thing to do. And
Yeah.
so that's where just, you know, kind of really being aware, being intentional with what you're doing in the moment, right? You
Mhm.
know, being locked in. If you're on your phone, you're on your phone. Pay attention to what you're looking at on your phone, you know, and
Yeah. Yeah. Or even, you know, if you do have, if somebody is contacting you by phone, maybe just have your first line of defense be, hey, I'm going to call you back directly. I'm going to call
yep,
my bank back or bank, you know, or
yes,
credit union back
yes,
directly at the number I have for
yeah,
them. And I will continue this conversation then,
yep,
you know, like maybe
yep,
that could be a first, you know, thought line of defense there.
yeah.
Just so you don't
And
even
then
get into the conversation any further with them, right?
100%. Yeah. And then go to our website, right? Go on your mobile app if you're a
Mhm.
member and look for our phone number and use
Yeah.
that trusted source to find the phone number or the information you need,
Mhm.
instead of calling back, you know, who
Yeah.
just called you,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Don't
That sort
just
of thing.
hit
Yeah.
redial on the phone number that
Right.
just called you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, for sure. Was there anything else that you want to touch on as far as recent fraud, you know, fraud trends or anything
That,
like that? Or
that really was the main one.
okay.
It's just, it's, you know, one of the things I maybe didn't touch on as much that we really don't have a ton of control over. And so it's kind of, it just is what it is. But I think it's important to recognize that over the years, data breaches have become so common and
Mhm.
happening so often. And we as humans, we have our information at so many different places, right? If you have a bank account, your information is there. If you see a doctor regularly, they have your information.
Yeah.
You have bills you're paying, they have your information. All of these things, right? And so over time, there's been, you know, obviously in the news and media, there's been reports of big data breaches. But in addition to those, you know, maybe big company names or
Hmm.
high volume compromises that get reported out, there's a lot of other little ones that don't get as much attention or don't get as much notice out to the public for
Hmm.
awareness. And sometimes it's those smaller ones where they have all your information, right? Your name, your social, your date of birth, your
Yeah.
address, all of the things. And so our identities, it's no longer a state of like, what can I do to keep my identity secure? Like to a certain degree,
Yeah.
we're all somewhat vulnerable to having that
Hmm.
information compromised. It's really about
Right.
just being attentive to what we're doing with our information,
Hmm.
and you know, just managing our accounts and keeping a pulse on like our credit report and things like that to make sure nothing unauthorized is happening with our identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of those like smaller data breaches, I remember I had one where like, I mean, it was like a food delivery account that I had, you know, like app or whatever. And the next time I had logged, I didn't get an email from the company that I saw. I mean, maybe it went into my junk email or something, but next time I logged in, it said, you know, your username and password was involved in a data breach. You should update it now. And I was just like, well, whatever, it's just a food delivery app. But then I was thinking further, you know, well, a lot of people use the same username and passwords for multiple websites. So that's another way that fraudsters, you know, they could get a hold of something from some random website or account that you might have, but then they'll try all these other, you know, websites
Yeah,
or financial institutions to see, hey, is this person have an account there? You know, so there's
yeah,
just so many ways. So yeah, it's really good to think about these things and talk about them. And you know, if like you said, if fraud has happened to you, it's good to talk to your family and friends about that and
yeah,
let them know your experience and what you did to, you know, hopefully prevent this in the future. And yeah, it's
yeah. And to
definitely
just level
great.
set, like, you know, we're not it's okay to be skeptical, right? It's okay to question
Yes.
things. And if you have someone that you trust that you can kind of just have that open dialogue with, like, what do you think
Mhm.
about all this, right? Like what's happening, right? And sometimes it's hard for us to just digest all that
Yeah.
transpired or is transpiring. And so having that connection to just, you know, has some sense of comfort of like, okay,
Mhm.
they also are questioning this, or they're like, oh, actually, so and so I just talked to the other day had some, like that just
Yeah.
helps us understand like that we're not alone. We're not the only ones experiencing it. As I said, like we all are susceptible. We're all getting
Mhm.
the bad text messages, the bad phone calls. We're
Yeah.
all, doing searches that probably if we click on the wrong thing could be bad news. And so
Yeah.
none of us are immune to it. It's just what we're doing to pay attention and be as proactive and preventative as we can.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. This was so great. And like I always say to all of our guests, I mean, I always learn so much from all of our speakers too. So this is really important information. And we just really thank you for all the work you do here at the credit union and just for taking your time tonight to share this important information with our membership. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be here and happy to spread the word and
Yes.
support in
Well,
any way I can.
yes, we'll definitely have you back again, a couple times a year to give us updates on on recent things and whatever
Yeah.
we can learn new. So I just wanted to let everyone know that when you exit the event this evening, there'll be a little survey that pops up, just a couple questions so we can get your feedback on tonight's event. So we thank you in advance for taking that. And then don't forget to join us for some of our upcoming seminar series events. Our next webinars include, this is a good one for entrepreneurs, how to pitch your business. And that's on Wednesday, March 5th at 6 p.m. with our partners from 20 Fathoms. And then we also have another one with our partners at Silver, which will be focusing on maximizing women's social security in retirement. And that will be Tuesday, March 11th. And that's actually a daytime one. So it'll be 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. On Tuesday, March 11th. So you can register for those events at msufcu.org/events. And we hope to see you all there. So thanks for joining us again. And thank you again, Jamie. And we will see you all again soon. Have a good night.